What's up, guys? We are back with another Cosmic Legions of Hvalkatar Book 2 Gravenight review with one of my most anticipated figures for this wave. There's quite a few of those. Despite there only being a handful of figures, I've got a lot of most anticipated. We're taking a look at KANOXX VULL, and I'm really excited about this one because he's, you know, that brute scale that we've sort of been hearing about for, seems like forever now, but we've only ever really gotten one, and it wasn't even really one because it's a centaur, so it sort of doesn't count. So this guy's like the first real full-on brute scale figure that we're getting our hands on. Hvalkatar in this wave is sort of brute scale, but he's a 2.0 figure. So this is our 1.0 brute scale, which means he's like slightly oversized and a little bit beefier. Not to mention the fact that he looks absolutely awesome. So we've got him here in our standard Cosmic Legion style packaging, of course. Figure in the window, you've got that hologram sort of shot of him down there on the bottom. One spine's going to give you a product shot, his bio, as well as his faction. The other spine's going to give you a write-up for Gravenight, and then the back is going to give you a current cross-sell of everything we've gotten thus far. We've got Book 1, Book 2, and the PowerCon figures. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go. Out of the package, our Cosmic Legions KANOXX VULL. A really interesting character and figure for a number of reasons. It's a brute scale figure, so it's the first real brute scale figure. You know, Hvalkatar is also a weird, oddly proportioned figure, but this guy literally is a brute scale in terms of the parts usage here. And this character is also one that comes out of the mind of a childhood Eric Treadaway. And Bill over at Dorklair already did a really good rundown of this, so I'm not gonna, you know, retread that. But this comes out of a series of characters that he created as a kid, and he kept in a red notebook for 40 years. And there's a lot of sort of callbacks to where this guy comes from and that original artwork and when he created it, and the notebook itself in this guy's bio. And even the faction too is called Red Spiral. So there's all sorts of crazy stuff related to this figure. This is also a figure that people are experiencing QC issues with too. Unfortunately, they are snapping that very cool looking leg. So let's see what this guy can do, see how he moves around. He's a brute scale figure, which of course means he's still a 1.0 figure. So there's not a whole lot that's truly new or different here. He's just bigger, and he does have a very asymmetrical look. So we've got our head that can look up pretty decently. He can look down really good. You do have this apparatus on his back. This is how he comes out of the box. So you've got the little canister on his back with the tubing. It doesn't exactly get in the way of anything, but it does make moving the head slightly more, I don't know, of a thing, because you do have to watch that, and you may want to pop it out and then readjust, but it's not really getting in the way. I find that it stays in place, for me so far, relatively well. There are other tubes that I have yet to put on him. Arms go out at the shoulders, of course. They swivel. We've got our single-jointed swiveling elbow. That's pretty close to 90 degrees, if not 90. You've got your swiveling gauntlet, and then you've got hinges and rotation at the wrist. So normal stuff there. Torso is still your standard single-piece torso, just like any other 1.0 figure. However, due to just his whole getup, he is a lot more limited than your average figure. So he's got, you know, like this cummerbund basically here. So he can't really do a whole lot. You can shimmy him around at the waist as far as swivel, but moving him in any real way outside of like backwards slightly is very, very difficult. You can take that off if you want, but you're going to have to figure out a way to sort of hide, you know, put a different belt on him or something if you want, basically. The legs go out pretty much all the way. They kick forward all the way. They kick backwards a good bit. You got your twist up there. You've got a single jointed knee. And again, this is the knee that people are snapping, so I would suggest heating it up. And it's the only thing on this figure that I felt I needed to heat up. And on my other one, because I do have two of these, I didn't need to heat it up at all. So your mileage is definitely going to vary in terms of, you know, how this works for you. But be careful, because it is a very different kind of leg. The knees also, of course, swivel. And then he does have very different feet. They still have the same functionality, so you've got a hinge. The rocker on this foot here, I find is somewhat difficult to engage just because of the construction, but it does have really, really good range. So you've got swivel, rocker, and you've got hinges. The hinge on this ankle is really well done. There's nothing getting in the way, basically. And then you've got all your normal stuff for your standard foot, your regular foot over here on his right, your left. So he's very much a normal figure. Like, there's truly nothing, you know, different or surprising about his articulation scheme just by virtue of him being a brute scale figure. That comes into his sizing. The only real downside for articulation's sake with this guy is that waist piece, which while it looks really cool, it does get in the way. And then you will want to be careful with that robo leg. Whether you think it's going to snap or not, just take caution when moving it around. What I really like about him, though, is just the overall design. I like this color, and I really like all of this very asymmetrical and techie stuff that's just sort of crammed all over him. So he's got things like, you know, these different bracers, and I really, really like this one here, which is the like the exposed one. So this is still a bracer. It's still a gauntlet type of piece, but it's flesh and metal. And then you've got this one over here, which is, you know, very like techie, spacey, greebling detail all over it, things like that. We've got our sort of girdle codpiece thing here, which I think it looks great. It looks really cool. You've got spots for, and we'll talk about these when we get to accessories. You've got little holes down here for some of the tubes that he comes with, because that's a big thing. That's a big thing with Cosmic Wave 2, is figures that have the capability of using tubing now. But I really like this in conjunction with the soft goods, with that fur piece. You know, it makes him look a little bit more, I don't know, brutal in some ways, despite the fact that this guy, in terms of his bio and where he comes from, is not as evil or menacing as he might actually look. He just happens to look really nasty. I like the back on it in particular, like all these spikes that come out of it. I really like the color on it as well. It's got this sort of metallic brown to it almost. It's a very deep color, so the light will help to pick that up. So it's like a golden brown color. I like the tubing on the back. This piece here is removable. It just goes in the back adapter slot, so you can put that in. You don't have to use it, but then you've got a hole in his head. And then you've also got the neck piece here, which is another pretty interesting piece for KANOXX. And you know what, you might as well just go ahead and do it. So this is a separate piece. So if you wanted, you can take that off, and you don't have to have him with that sort of extra neck. It does make him have a little bit of a different profile. He does look odd from the side as a result, but you have another option there. So this is a whole different thing. It's a neck sleeve. It's got, you know, armor bits. It's got, you know, part of a pauldron on there, basically. You've got these sort of canisters that come down off the front. So a very different kind of piece that we're not really used to seeing, period, when it comes to legions of any kind. So that's different, kind of new. I do like that. And as you can see, I mean, it all pops apart very easily to change that if you want. But it makes him look, it's another one of those things about this figure, about this character, that makes him look maybe more evil than he actually is. So it plays up the idea that he, you know, he's this big hulking guy that might actually not be a super evil character at the end of the day. He's just sort of a victim of circumstance because he's in the grave ring. But I really do like the way he looks. He's probably one of my favorite figures in this wave in terms of just sheer visuals. He does have a little bit of added size by virtue of being a brute scale figure. They're not super huge, of course, and we will do some size comparisons, but he's a little bit bigger. And then you've got, you know, more of that asymmetry down here as well. You've got this sort of wraps on the calf down here on his right, your left. But I mean, I would be lying if I said my favorite piece on this figure wasn't this particular leg. I really like this. Despite the fact that people are having trouble with it, I really like the way this looks. It makes him look much more unique than if he just had two regular legs. It gives another great sense of asymmetry on the figure. I've already taken one of them off, and you might have seen in other videos where I've used it on the Valiant Knight to make it look like, you know, a knight has been augmented in some way, because this isn't a super techie look. It looks very cobbled together. It's got very flat, very earthy tones to it, so it's not, you know, super bright or neon colors or anything like that. It looks worn and kind of nasty and beaten, and it just looks like a cool design. I like the spike coming out of the knee. I like the exposed wires, things like that. And then you've got your head sculpt up here, which again plays up more of the idea behind this guy. It integrates more of that techie asymmetry type of pieces to it. So you've got the tube coming out of one side. You've got that sort of eyepiece that wraps up to his head on one side, and the little, maybe like a communications device over there as well. He does have a really piercing red eye in contrast to this very purpley blue body, which again, the body and the head all has a wash on it, or dry brushing rather, to bring out some of that sculpt. You've got the gritted teeth. You've got this sort of, you know, kind of like wrap around his head, spikes coming out of him and everything. So he looks super nasty, super gnarly, and very much looks like the guy in this particular wave that you wouldn't want to go up against in the grave ring. And I think that's likely why he was kind of the poster child, no pun intended, when they were doing some of the advertising for this wave, because he looks super nasty, super gnarly, and like he's going to throw down. And I'm really happy with the way this guy has translated into figure form. It's just a lot of cool stuff jammed into one figure. Now for some size comparisons, let's start with other Legions, and we're going to stick to Cosmic. So we've got a 1.0, regular 1.0 figure here on the left. We got Cosmic Walter. And then we've got, from the same wave, we've got Ias Cypidion here on the right to give you an idea of how he's going to stack up next to the other differently sized figure in this wave. And then, of course, Walter's here to show you what he looks like next to a standard Legion. So he is bigger. He's not huge, but he is noticeably larger than your average 1.0 figure. Let's do a Hasbro figure. So here is a Marvel Legends. There's Forge. Let's do a NECA figure. Here's a Universal Turtle. There's Mummy Mike. Let's do an Ultimates figure. Here's a Transformer. You can see Trax is pretty good comparison for overall height compared to what KANOXX is going to bring to your display. And then because he's always here, here's a Figuarts. Here is Superhero Piccolo. So this gives you a pretty good idea of how he's going to stack up. He's going to be a larger style figure. He's not super huge, but he is definitely going to add a little bit more height and a little bit more dimension to your Legion's display just by virtue of having these slightly larger brute scale parts. Now as far as accessories goes, KANOXX has a decent number of things. A lot of them aren't necessarily what you might consider, you know, accessories, real accessories, things that are weapons or stuff that he can hold. Most of what he comes with are things that are going to augment his look. So to start with, we do get an extra head sculpt, and this is it's a similar but just a different expression kind of head sculpt. So this is a stoic, no gritting of the teeth kind of expression. Maybe, you know, in terms of how they've described him being not this evil, brutish kind of guy, this maybe is more his normal look, whereas the other head sculpt is him where he has to get in and fight. So you do have a couple options there. We do get a singular left, well, your right, pauldron, and I gotta say right off the bat, this might be one of my favorite pauldrons ever, period, across all lines. I love this thing. It's big. It's got tons of detail, lots of weathering all over it. I like the spikes on it. My only real negative for this is that he only comes with one, but it does play up the intense asymmetrical design and look that they've got going for him. So maybe not necessarily a negative. It does look really nice with just the one. And then he comes with the extra tubes. So you've got 3 tubes, you've got a small one here, and I guess I'll have to, I'm not so sure I remember exactly which one wasn't included. I think this is the one that was missing from the box, so you might have it in a baggie if you haven't gone through your figures already. So one that goes from the gauntlet to the pauldron. You've got one that goes from the foot down here to this little power pack thing, and then you've got one that goes from this canister to this little power pack thing over here. And they are all pretty decent. I feel like the one on the arm is maybe a smidge too short. I kind of wish it was a little bit longer, but it works pretty well. I don't tend to have a lot of issues with them popping out. They are specific to where they are. Like they're curved and bent in such a way that you should know where they go, and then they're also keyed when it comes to popping them in. So this kind of completes his look if you want to have him fully kitted out. I do really like all these tubes. Those are generally a frustration point with figures, but I like them. They do look really good. He does get an extra set of hands, so you've got gripping on him in the box, and then you get a set of clawing, grasping, gesturing kind of hands. And then we get his singular weapon, which is this big mace kind of thing. It does pop apart, so the ball is separate from the actual staff itself. I have seen people break this. I can't remember what it was. I think they're snapping it in the middle or something. This is heavy. Like, it is absolutely heavy. The ball is heavier than the actual staff itself, so you are going to have to play a balancing act with it. I kind of wish it was a little bit lighter because it does make handling it a little bit difficult. It does look really good, however. It's definitely sized for a figure of this size and stature, and there is a decent amount of paint on it as well. A lot of weathering on this thing as he's about to smash someone's head in. So he does come with a decent amount of stuff. Most of it, again, is to complete his look or to change his look rather than give you a bunch of things he can hold. So a little bit of a difference from, say, the overwhelming majority of Legions. But I think what he has is pretty solid. I really like this extra head sculpt. And again, I really like that pauldron. And surprisingly, I really like all these tubes. So yeah, overall, I really like this figure. I think KANOXX is probably one of the better figures in this wave. He does have a couple issues and hang-ups. Mostly that left leg, the robo leg. Watch out for it. That's about it. And then he does have impeded articulation because of that girdle, cummerbund kind of thing. but I can work around that. He looks cool, he moves well beyond all of those problems. I like the tubing, despite how frustrating that can be on a figure. I really like that robo leg. And just his design in general, the asymmetry, all of this stuff sort of bolted on him, the neck sleeve, all that kind of stuff is fun and different. It makes him look super, super menacing, despite the fact that his backstory maybe isn't that way, which I also find pretty interesting as well. And then beyond that, the creative inspiration for this figure makes him cooler to me just than if he was any old figure that was made now. This thing came out of Eric's notebook, and there's, you know, pictures on Source Horsemen that show those original drawings, which just make him a little bit cooler. I like seeing the history and the genesis of that original drawing from when Eric was a kid into this thing as a finished product 40 plus years later. It's just cool to me. So that's going to do it for this look at the Cosmic Legions of Hvalkatar Book 2 KANOXX VULL. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.